Mr. Mags here. Today, I will be ranking every single Pokemon Elite Four squad to essentially determine which region I believe has the best Elite Four. Now, the way I have determined the way I'll be ranking these Elite Four squads, I think is pretty interesting and a lot of fun. So let's get right into my criteria for how I develop these rankings. First, I will only be judging the Elite Four aces. So just taking the four aces and just ranking it based on them alone. None of the rest of their team, not the champion or anything else like that. Just the four aces in any given Elite Four. There might be some instances where a Pokemon who is on the team but not actually the ace might influence a judgment here and there, but in the vast majority of cases, I'll just be taking the four aces of each Elite Four member. Only the initial battle teams will be judged. There might be other times where you can rematch the Elite Four or battle them in a different scenario where they have a different ace or a different team in general. I won't be taking any of those into account. Just the first time in any given Pokemon game you can fight this set of Elite Four members, only those fights will be counted. And every instance of a new group of four aces will be counted. For example, Platinum, even though it's the same characters in the Elite Four as Diamond and Pearl, their aces are different from Diamond and Pearl. So those would be two different entries. Same thing with Black and White 2, having a different, at least a little different than Black and White. And then the challenge mode is also different from Black and White 2 base. So, yeah, there'll be more teams than you might expect actually in this video here. And the primary factors for how I judge these are strength, coolness factor, and also an X factor. Just anything else about this squad of aces that I particularly like or dislike or just vibe with or just, personal biases, just that kind of thing that isn't necessarily as tangible as, some of these other things. But in general, I look at the four aces and just how imposing, how cool, how iconic is this group of Elite Four aces. And lastly, but honestly, probably most importantly, this is all just my personal subjective opinion. There might be some instances where you very validly could rank something above or below where I did. That's perfectly valid. I would really appreciate any, discussion down below. If you agree, disagree with any placements I have here. There might be sometimes we're just, a personal bias towards a certain team member might, influence where it stands, and also just, I might like certain Pokemon more than others, and just therefore, um, th them being on the squad might give or take some points away. So without further ado, let's get right into the actual ranking here. And there ended up being 14 different unique Elite Fours, as far as like unique squads of aces. So how it's going to work is on every entry, I'll have the four aces on a grid here, and then I'll just give you my thoughts and reasoning as to why they are where they are. So in last place here, I have the Ultra Sun and Moon Alola squad. So, fun fact about this team, and actually the Sun and Moon team as well, but this is even worse. Alola is the only region where every single ace Pokemon in their Elite Four is below 500 base stat total. Now, base stat total isn't everything, especially in later generations where stats start becoming a little more min-maxed. So, yeah, you have a really high attack and speed, but your special attack isn't high, your defenses aren't as high. If you don't really care when you're just a glass cannon, that's fine. If like two of them were below 500, that's fine. But then when you have a lot of other Elite Fours who use aces who are, 520s, 530s, 600 with pseudo legendaries, it definitely you can definitely feel when an Elite Four member has a Pokemon that are a little more underwhelming stat-wise, and this is definitely the case here. I'm just gonna go down the list here to, especially since this is last, I feel like my explanation for that is gonna be um, a little more warranted here. So starting off with Alolan Dugtrio. Alolan Dugtrio is just a slightly slower Doug Trio. Sure, it's part steel now, so we can hit fairy and ice types well, but that does not make up for the fact that it's now weak to fighting, fire, and ground, three very prevalent types. So, like in Doug Trio as a Pokemon, even after it got buffed in Gen 7, isn't really that impressive. I would personally even take Alolan Sandslash over this. At least it can make use of Slush Rush if it wants to get up the snow. At least it just looks a little more imposing. It's still not great. It's still well below 500, but I just personally never understood why they would put a Alolan Dugtrio as the ace of an Elite Four member. It could be on the team. That's fine. I have no problem with it being on the team. But imagine if Dugtrio was Giovanni's ace as the eighth gem in Kanto. Even that would be crazy. Like I personally just don't understand. Granted, there weren't that many other good steel types to pull from, and in that case, maybe you shouldn't have a steel Elite Four member in the first place. That's kind of going to be the case with a lot of these. I feel like there were other Pokemon that definitely could have been utilized here, like actually deserved to be ace of an Elite Four potential, but instead we have a Alolan Dugtrio. And then we have two cannon. Now, in my humble opinion, in no universe should any normal flying Route 1 bird not named Staraptor should ever be an ace of an Elite Four member. In fact, I'll be generous as possible and say that I believe that no Route 1 bird that's normal and flying, not named Staraptor, should ever be the ace of any major trainer past like the fifth gym. Again, I feel like being kind of generous. I genuinely do not understand why they decided to make a flying type Elite Four member when the best flying type option you have is Toucannon. Now, for the record, Toucannon does have a shockingly high attack stat. So it can get off exactly one really good flying type Z move. That's cool and all, but if you resist it, then it's or use protector behind a substitute when it hits you, then the one thing it has going for it, you've neutralized it. Now it's a super slow bird that like if you have a good fast ice or electric type, you can probably outspeed and one or two shot it very easily. It just doesn't feel like ace potential for, I just personally don't understand why they would even bother having a flying Elite Four member if the best you could do is two cannon. Like I feel like Mallow and her Serena would have fit well here. Sophocles with Vikavolt or Alolan Golem would have also worked very well here. All of those are, if they're not 500, they're like right around there, if not a little higher. I know Serena's 510. I'm pretty sure Alolan Golem's right at 500, maybe 490. It's like around there. Overall, I think at least more impressive as an Elite Four ace than two cannon. Uh, Palisand, I have no problem with Palisand. Palisand is one of those Pokemon where it is really good at what it needs to do. It has very good bulk, pretty good HP, and pretty good defenses. It doesn't have a great speed, but that's fine. Not every ace needs to be super fast as long as it is pretty bulky and also has a very, solid attacking stat, and its special attack is very usable. It also has good sustain with the shore up move. So even though it's not going to hit the absolute hardest with its Z move, I think it has 100, 110 special attack that's still gonna hurt if you don't resist or are immune to it. And even just design wise, I think of the four, I personally feel it has the most imposing design. It's still not, it's not like, Tyranitar or Dragonite or, like a pseudo legendary tier ace here, but it's still, I think, more to me personally feels more like ace potential than these other three here. Which lastly we have Lycanroc. Now, on paper, I think Lycanroc is fine, at least a lot better than Toucan and Alolan Dugtrio. I still think Palisand just feels more like an ace Pokemon 4 and Elite Four member than Lycanroc. It honestly kind of has a similar vibe to it that Absol does over in Hoenn. However, I like Absol and his team a lot more for several reasons. First, I really like Absol's mystique factor on his team. There's a good chance that the player wouldn't have even seen Absol up to that point, and I really like when a major trainer can have a Pokemon that the player may have not even seen it up to that point. Absol's only found on one route at a very low percentage, and no other trainers, even like random trainers, as far as I can remember, have one. Maybe one random one in Victory Road or something, but actually they wouldn't because it's supposed to be Sydney's ace. So yeah, you get through the rest of the team and it throws an Absol and you don't even know what that thing is yet. I really like that. Whereas in this instance, you literally already fought this Lycanroc before. You fought Olivia as a second Island Kahuna way earlier in the game with this Lycanroc being her ace. Doesn't have any new gimmicks. She still uses Continental Crush on you. Um, it it doesn't like it literally hasn't, evolved since it's already a final form. It just feels a little underwhelming to get to the Elite Four and then you've literally already fought this ace. It just, I don't know, it just kind of makes this already kind of underwhelming Pokemon feel even more underwhelming because you basically already know how to deal with it because you fought it before. And another reason why I like Absol and Sydney's ace even more is something that actually applies to all four of these. Um, apps that his Absol is first. I like Absol a lot, but it does have quite a bit below 500 base. I think it's like 570, 580, somewhere around there. Um, but it's first, so it's okay that it's not the absolute strongest Pokemon. It'd be weird if Salamence were first, since that is literally a pseudo legendary, but there's no way you can fight Salamence first. You have to fight Absol first. Any one of these Pokemon can be less. You could fight Alolan Dugtrio as the last Pokemon you fight before the champion. I think Lycanroc or Palisand, one of them can I think Palisand more so, but either of them of the four is probably the most final ace uh, vibe wise, but just I don't think hardly anything about any of these individual Pokemon really work as a whole. They're just not my favorite, clearly, not my favorite group of aces here. Moving over to 13. And here we have the other Alolan squad here with the Sun and Moon Elite Four. And something that honestly kind of makes me dislike the Ultra Sun and Moon one even more is that the only thing they changed was they took away Crabominable to put in Alolan Dugtrio. And I actually really like Crabominable here. I think it makes complete sense to have or like thematically to have the first Island Kahuna you fight be one of the Elite Four members. I think it's honestly a little undercut by the fact that Olivia is also there, but it's not a thing where it's all four Kahunas, even though there's four Kahunas. I feel it would have been cool to have all four Kahunas be the the Elite Four members. Like if you're gonna have two, have all of them. Either have one or have all four. Having Carbonable and Lycanroc feels a little weird. And it's even weirder that of the two, they got rid of Crabominable. That just feels wrong to me. So even though Crabominable still does have below 500 base stat total, it at least has those stats are put in places that make Crabominable shine the best. It's pretty much all in attack, HP, and defense. And as long as you can hit hard and are kind of hard to take down, I think that is more or less what an ace Pokemon needs to do. And then the same general issues I have with the rest of them. But because all of them have below 500, because I have that issue so much with Toucan, and also I don't love that this Lycanroc you've already fought before, because at least with Hollow's first fight, it was a crab brawler. And then in this time, you fight it as a Crabominable, so it's at least a little different. Whereas Lycanroc is the exact same Pokemon. Next up, number 12, the Johto Elite Four. Now, if we ignore Xatu for just a second, Crobat, Machamp, Houndoom, that's actually a fairly solid squad. I don't absolutely love Houndoom here, especially since, actually, for a couple reasons. One, you've already fought Houndoom on a major trainer before with Archer. His ace was Houndoom. So by the time you get to Karen here, you feels like none of her Pokemon are like really that unique because almost all of them have been actually I think I think all of them are used by some other major trainer. So even her ace Pokemon isn't really unique. However, in a vacuum, it's at least could be argued it could be somewhat impressive enough to be ace potential if Tyranitar didn't exist. That's the other thing. There is literally a dark pseudo legendary Pokemon in Generation 2 that they just don't use. It's not on Lance's team, it's on no other major trainers' teams. So why doesn't Karen have one? I'll never understand that. But at least in a vacuum, just on paper, those three Pokemon are fine. I don't really love Machamp here. If that were Heracross, this could easily go up a few points. But because Machamp is a Gen 1 Pokemon that they put in here, I don't know, it's one of those things where I wouldn't really like have a major issue with if there weren't other issues around it, but because there are issues that I'll get if more to in just a second, Machamp being a Gen 1 Pokemon here, I take even stronger issue with that as well. And man, oh man, I do not like Xatu here in the slightest. First of all, Will has two Zatus on his team. He leads with a Zatu, and he also has a Zatu as his ace. Already, I feel like Zatu isn't really ace potential. It just doesn't have any kind of vibe that screams ace to me. It's a weird choice to be his ace, but it's even weirder for it to be the ace when he has a duplicate of it earlier. It's not like Phoebe, where she literally had to have Dusclops as her ace and then a second one on her team because there weren't that many ghost types to pick from. There were a slew of other psychic types to pick from. And instead, we got Zatu. You could have had Espeon or Slowking, but nope, Zatu. If this were Slowking, Crobat, Heracross, Houndoom, easily top 10 potential. Maybe even like top, I don't think quite top five, but like it would definitely go up quite a bit. If this were Slowking, Crobat, Heracross, Tyranitar, that's easily top five potential, maybe even a good bit higher than that. But in its current state, with Zatu just not wowing me as an Elite Four ace, with Machamp not being a Gen 2 Pokemon, with Houndoom not feeling unique to Karen and not living up to the full potential I personally feel a Dark Elite Four member in Johto should go to. Yeah, that's why this is as low as it is. Next for number 11, the last before the top 10, we have Paldea. Now, I actually enjoy the overall Elite Four, like the actual fight. I think the individual teams are structured in ways that are fairly challenging, but on paper, just looking at this squad as a whole squad, it's a little underwhelming. Clodsire, I've always felt it was a little weird to be Rika's ace. Granted, there weren't that many other. non paradox Pokemon ground types to really pull from. So I don't blame them if they had to have a ground Elite Four member. Clodsire is about as good as you can do. I do like that it has its water absorbability, so it's basically it's only weak to ice and grass after it tears into a ground type. So it has that going for it. And it has like a I don't know, like a fun vibe to it where it's almost like intentionally kind of goofy and that makes it cool. Like I don't know, I could I could see arguments for people liking Claude Cider here. But just like with Machamp, I think I would like it more if the rest of the squad here lifted it up more. Tinkaton is another one that's kind of in the same boat as Claude Sire, where it it's actually kind of funny that as the ace, it fits the trainer very well, but just vibe wise, just it being the ace Pokemon, does it utilize the fact that it tears into a steel type and then uses Gigaton Hammer, this absolutely, absolute nuke of a move very well? Yes, absolutely. However, you can only do it once every other turn, and also just on, you know, in a when you put them all four together like this, it just doesn't quite. It just doesn't. I don't know. There's something about Tinkaton, yeah, Tinkaton here that just it's just not wowing me, like others. If like kind of Tinkaton if Tinkaton or Clodsire were here, if like one or the other, and the other like was more impressive, I think I'd be more lenient on the other one because they're both here. They're both kind of like gimmicky aces. It just, not really working for me. Definitely not helped out by the Flamigo here. I like Flamigo as a Pokemon. It's like kind of weirdly strong, especially for how early you can get it, but that's actually an issue I have with it. It's because you can find it so early in the region. You can actually find it before you get to the first major hub city. So that mystique for the player is gone. On top of it, just looking a little, I don't know, it's definitely not the most impressive bird I've ever seen. I'll just leave it at that. So already the first three Pokemon on the squad are a little underwhelming. At least we do end on a pseudo legendary. A pseudo legendary being on a squad is already gonna, rank it up some points. I was actually kind of flipping between Paldea and Johto for this spot. But because there is a pseudo legendary here, and I like Excalibur a lot, that put it over the edge just a little bit. Still not quite top 10 potential, but it at least it at least helps it, not be worse than where I put it. This is definitely the one that I feel probably was the most contentious. I could definitely hear people have arguments for liking this squad quite a bit. But just per my rules, per how I'm judging this, when laid out like this, it's just not wowing me. It doesn't even really have, that X factor in the ways that I would personally like. So yeah, that's why it's just barely out of the top 10. Moving into the top 10, number 10, we have the black and white Unova squad. Now, this one is so the last one was definitely what I feel might be one of the more contentious ones. This one is almost entirely a personal bias pick here. I actually like most of the Pokemon here quite a bit. Chandelure on any black and white or Gen 5 team that Chandelure's here, no issue with Chandelure. Chandelure 100% deserves to be the ace here. I think uh Golurk could have easily also been an ace and that would have been fine too, but Chandelure has a absolutely massive special attack. It just the vibe Chandelure gives off is I think flawless for an Elite Four member. So no problems there. Mienshao, I like Mienshao a lot. Actually one of my more favorite Gen 5 Pokemon. Same with Bisharp. I like it a lot. However, with both Bisharp and Mienshao, both of them are on teams of other Pokemon that I genuinely think kind of deserve to be the ace over it. Bisharp, I like Bisharp, but I think Krookodile probably works as an ace better. I like Mienshao, but Conkeldurr I think works a little better as well. And and clearly Game Freak agrees because even within Black and White in the rematch, they made Conkeldurr his ace. They didn't change any of the other aces, I think. Maybe they did one, which we'll get to actually a little bit later. Um, but even within the same game, they switched his ace. So I don't know why they didn't just retroactively make Conkeldurr the ace here. That's I don't know, a little odd. Um, but yeah, that's not I'm not knocking Bisharp and Mienshao. It's more of a more of a, in an ideal world, I personally think the ace would I think be more impressive to be something else. And as far as Gothitelle goes, I've just never really liked Gothitelle. I've never really felt like it worked as an ace here. Maybe just because I like for Uniclus, it's designed a little better. Um, I don't know. I was always kind of mentally attributed me and Reuniclus or even Musharna, I think fits Caitlyn a little better. It wouldn't definitely be not unique to her since it's also on one of your rival teams, but one of those two, I think, kind of fit her vibe a little better. I've just never really liked Gothitelle as an ace of an Elite Four member. It just never really felt right to me. So when three out of the four here, just in my opinion, don't really feel right as aces, that's going to knock it down a little bit. So yeah, once again, completely, I completely understand if you disagree with that, but there are a lot of other really good teams coming. So I think this personally is appropriately placed. Move over to number nine, which is actually the very next Unova team, the Black and White 2 team. And the only thing they switched is they switched out me and Xiao for Conkeldurr. Just like I said, even within Black and White, they already decided that Conkeldurr makes more sense as his ace, and then in Black and White 2, they fully implemented it. I really wish they had changed a little more. Like, first of all, I think they easily could have had at least half of the Elite Four members switched out. It's been several years in game. I think it would have made perfect sense to switch the Elite Four members. Some of the gym leaders had changed, so why not make the some of the Elite Four members different? Lenora is no longer a gym leader, so maybe have her as an Elite Four member. I know you already have another normal gym with Sharon, but maybe either don't do that or you can have two. It's not a huge deal. Gen 2 had two normal or had two fighting specialists. Have one of the the Monkey Trio brothers have one of them, step up to the plate and be an Elite Four member. Just, you know, something else to kind of differentiate them even more. Because as of right now, I remember the first time I was playing White 2. I got here and I was, a little disappointed the first time I went into Chantel's room, even though I think she's probably the best of the four. I was a little disappointed to see that she was still here, and then even more so for the other three. So that's just kind of this is kind of where my head is at for this one. If they had if they had switched up the teams a little more, even switched out Bisharp or Crocodile, or switched out Gothitelle for something else, I would put this a little higher, but as it is, with how relatively unchanged it is, only one out of four, I personally can't justify putting it any higher. Next up, number eight, the Diamond and Pearl, Sinnoh Elite Four. So, just like with Johto, we're going to ignore the psychic type for just a second. Drapion, Hippowdon, Infernape is actually a pretty solid squad there. I personally have a bit of an issue with Elite Four members having starter Pokemon, especially as the ace. It just feels a little, I don't know, like it feels a little cheap. It feels a little not forced. I don't know, just I never really liked it. However, considering in Gen 4 you literally only had two fire types to work with, because for some reason the Diamond and Pearl Pokedex didn't have half the usable Pokemon available, but whatever. Infernape had to be the ace. So I'm not don't have like a huge issue with it. It just on principle for me personally, I've never really loved when Elite Four members have starter Pokemon. That being said, taking that out of the equation, like I said, Drapion, Hippowdon, Infernape, just that set is actually pretty imposing. I like Hippowdon being able to set up the stand. It obviously would be better if it was a little earlier, especially in Gen 4 when you have that perpetual sand going until you or someone changes it. Drapion is so good they even kept him on the Platinum squad. So, all three of those just on paper, very good. Bronzong really brings this squad down. I've ragged on this before, but Bronzong just does not feel like ace potential, especially not the ace of a final Elite Four member. It Bronzong is potentially the last Pokemon you fight before Cynthia, and that is crazy to me. If you rotated this in any direction, I would be way more lenient about it. Like if Infernape or Drapion were last, I'd be fine with it. Obviously, the Drapion team has other issues with having a Dustox and Beautifly on that team, but like just talking about this squad, Infernape or Drapion, I think work a lot better as the ace of a final Elite Four before Cynthia. Bronzong just does not do it for me. You fought so many Bronzors throughout along the way here, and Bronzong just never ever felt like even I remember specifically in my first playthrough of Diamond and Pearl or of Diamond specifically, Lucian just always felt very underwhelming because Bronzong was his ace. If anything, his Alakazam felt more like an ace because it was the hardest on his team to take down. So I don't know. It it just doesn't do it for me. The other three, great. If Gallade were available, or if there were any other even moderately stronger psychic type, here instead, this honestly might go up a few points. But the way it is right now, Bronzong just brings the average so far down that I personally can't justify putting it any higher, especially since Platinum does this squad exponentially better. As much as I like Hippowdon and Infernape, just, in a squad like this, the Platinum one is so much better that I think personally, this is appropriately placed in comparison. Moving over to number seven, the Ruby Sapphire and Emerald Hoenn Elite Four. Maybe it's just Gen 3 bias. Gen 3 was my first Pokemon games, but I have always adored this squad. Like I said before, I really like Absol. The mystique with this here, I did know about it because I had a guidebook and I pretty much did catch every Pokemon I found and like actually did search for one. I don't think I used it on my first team, but I did find it. Um, so yeah, but regardless, I do think Absol works very well as Ace, especially in Emerald when Rock Slide. Actually using that good attack stat that his dark moves can't take advantage of in Gen 3 because of the all dark moves are special. It knowing Rock Swords Dance and Rock Slide, if you weren't ready for that, it could just decimate your entire team. Um, Dusclops on paper is a solid enough pick. It's a little unfortunate that Phoebe basically had to use two Dusclops because there were only so many ghost types to pick from. You basically had to double up on something. Maybe you could throw Shedinja in there somewhere, but that's not ace potential, and also that's still you would still have to have two of something. So if it were Shedinja, two Bayonet, Sableye, Dusclops, I don't think this would be any higher, but I still, regardless, um, Dusclops is still, I think on paper a solid enough Pokemon, or Pokemon that doesn't like bring down the average, at least not nearly as much um, as Bronzong did previously. Now, have my overall thoughts about Dusclops been, I guess, tampered with slightly due to now knowing that it can evolve again? Maybe a little bit, and you'll see one with Dust Warren a little bit later. But I still think on paper, it doesn't it isn't, weak or, it's not the vibes of this Pokemon don't bring down the rest of the squad nearly enough to rank it any lower. Especially when you have Walrein, who especially in his Gen 3 sprite looked huge and scary. And then Salamence, who, as I've said before, a pseudo-legendary Pokemon will automatically bring you up several points. So, and I really like Salamence a lot. Um, Drake's team as a whole is a little unfortunate that its entire team is super weak to ice, but you know, regardless, Salamence was always a problem. Even if you had an ice type, there's a good chance it's gonna outspeed you. It'll know at least one fire move. Like it's a problem. It always uh this is one of those Pokemon that definitely feels like a final roadblock before you get to the champion. Unlike, again, I personally feel Houndoom and Bronzong just aren't quite that for me, whereas Salamence absolutely is. Moving over to number six, the one right before the top five, we have the last of the Black and White 2 teams, the Unova Challenge Mode team. And the only thing they changed here from the base Black and White 2 is they switched out Gothitelle for Metagross. Now, do I think it's a little weird that Metagross is not a Gen 5 Pokemon? Yes, it is bizarre. I don't know why in the rematches in Black and White they switched out Caitlyn's ace to be a Metagross as well. But then like they gave Metagross and Conkeldurr, like they switched those but didn't switch the other two. I don't know, that's a little weird, but regardless, Metagross is here. Um, I like Conkeldurr and Chandelure a lot as aces. Bisharp doesn't bring down the average nearly enough to really like me to really have a to personally like have an issue with. And then Metagross just by nature of it being a pseudo legendary automatically brings it up a couple of points. So yeah, I think this deserves number six. Not quite top five potential, but yeah, it's a very, I think personally, very solid squad here, especially if you do find that Metagross to last, you know, that that feels good to me. Would it be better if it were a pseudo legendary from the region? Yes, but it is what it is. All right, top five. Now, this next pick actually kind of surprised even me when I was like tallying them up. I kind of even surprised the fact that I put this where I put it. That'd be the Kalos Elite Four. Now, I have dogged on the X and Y Elite Four in several different videos kind of brutally. And I stand by all of those statements. I genuinely believe it is bizarre that none of them have mega evolutions on their team. They all only have four Pokemon, even though they are all the strongest Elite Four had ever been up to that point. And even still, I'm pretty sure, as far as like main story Elite Four members, they are the strongest Elite Four team has ever been. So that's always been a little weird. But on paper, their aces are actually fairly impressive. It does kind of get lowered. by the fact that you can fight them in any order, so you can do Talonflame last. That's a little underwhelming. If you could do Aegislash or Noivern confirmed last, that would definitely help quite a bit. But I don't think it I don't think it like knocks it down enough to go out of the top five. Um, Talonflame is a little more underwhelming than it maybe should be, considering it doesn't have its hidden ability Gale Wings, so it's not going to always prioritize you with its flying moves. But of the Route 1 birds, I think Talonflame, Corviknight, and Staraptor are the only three that even come close to making sense as Elite Four ace potential. Um, and I'll give Talonflame a little bit of a pass considering the only other option was Pyroar, and that would have fallen into the same issue you had with Houndoom, where you literally already had uh the leader of the evil team use that Pokemon as his ace, so it wouldn't really feel like her Pokemon. So yeah, I'm more or less fine with Talonflame being here. I do wish I had a little higher attack, but just design wise, I've always really liked it. I think it works fine enough as the ace. Barbaracle is a Pokemon that I've never liked. It's actually probably a top five least favorite Pokemon for me. Just I'm probably gonna do that list at some point, but just off the top of my head, I can't think of many other Pokemon I actively dislike more design wise than Barbaracle. I just don't understand any part of what's going on. I don't understand the hand for a face. I don't understand all the eyes. I don't really know what they were going for with this, but it still, I think, is on paper, like just kind of vibe wise, I think it does kind of work as the ace of a water elite form member. I don't think it really like represents the water type the absolute best. I think Cloudwhisper represents that more, but um, Barbarical is stronger, so that's fine. But man, I do not like his design at all. But objectively speaking, I think it works fine as an Elite Four ace. Now, these other two are absolutely ace potential. This is a little weird that we have a Dragon Elite Four member and she doesn't get to use Dragalge, or no, well, she uses Dragalge. She doesn't get to use Gudra. Yes, 100%. It's a little weird, but regardless, Noivern is still, I think, Elite Four ace material. And an Aegislash definitely is. Um, I I'm gonna backpedal just a little bit. I genuinely think this Elite Four total maybe even would have bumped up in a slot if Aegislash were confirmed last. Um, if it went Talonflame, Barbaracle, Noivern, Aegislash, I think that would have been a really good progression of Elite Four members. But the way it is now, I don't know. I really like Aegislash. I think it works. I think it works super well as an ace. Um, just but because you can fight it in any order and then have Talonflame potentially be last, yeah, that's just knocking it down a little bit. But like I said, honestly, even I was a little like surprised by how high I ranked this, considering how underwhelming the rest of the overall their overall teams are. But just looking at the aces, I think this is pretty solid. Next up, number four, the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire Hoenn Elite Four. It's the exact same as it was in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, except now Dusclops is Dust Noir. And that alone, I think, is enough to elevate this squad up to absolutely top five potential. Like, I don't know. There's not a lot I can say about this. Like, even like looking at it, even Absol looks like a little underwhelming compared to the other four. But like I've said in the past, because you have to fight Absol first and then you go in order here, I'm gonna be a little more lenient on, his design not being as imposing because it's first. So yeah, this is a this is a really good squad. Um, do I honestly I kind of wish they had maybe just gone ahead and did mega evolutions on the first pass through. I think that would have been fine, especially since the player has had access to them for a while. I appreciate them having rematches to have mega evolutions at some point. But even Mega Absol, Mega Sableye, Glalie, and Salamence, that all of those megas I think still would have been top five material. But we're not on that team. We're going on this team here, and even this squad, I think, absolutely deserves the number four spot. All right, top three, the Sinnoh Platinum Elite Four squad. Now, I genuinely think that this is the absolute best you could possibly hope for with an Elite Four squad that doesn't have a pseudo legendary. Rhyperior has a similar vibe that other pseudos do, but it is not a pseudo legendary. But that's exactly the point. Rhyperior, Magmortar, and Gallade are all spectacular Pokemon. Gallade is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. Drapion was so good from Diamond and Pearl. That was the one they kept. It does my OCD kind of feel like they maybe should have switched it out for Yan Mega or like some other bug type. Actually, Yan Mega is probably the only other like viable option. Now that it's available in the deck since the other three changed, probably, and also actually give him a proper bug type as his ace. But I really like Trapion as the ace there, so I don't have any actual issues with it. But Hyperior, Magmortar, and Gallade, along with Drapion, I genuinely think that's like of the aces that we have, like, of the squad of aces we have, this is the absolute best you could possibly do without having a pseudo legendary on the team. Like Gallade is absolutely a last thing you see before Cynthia style Pokemon. It maybe doesn't look like as big and as imposing as Magmortar or Rhyperior, but I think it still has that Final Ace vibe to it that Bronzong just did not have. All right. Now for number two, Kanto. So in this specific instance, I fudged it slightly. In Red, Blue, and Yellow, and then Leaf Green, Fire Red. Lorelei, she technically had two aces. For some reason, both her Lapras and her Jinx were on the same level, 56 in Red, Blue, and Yellow, 54 in Leaf Green, Fire Red. I'm not really sure why they were both on the same level, especially in Leaf Green, Fire Red, when Lapras was clearly considered the ace since it was the one that had the citrus berry. But regardless, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee established Lapras definitively as her ace, so that's the one I'm going with. That's the one I would have picked regardless because it has the highest base set total because it was given that citrus berry, and it's coded to be last on her team if they're just going in team order in the Gen 1 games. So yeah, Lapras always deserved it regardless. But man, this is a good squad. Like they knew what they were doing the first time. Lapras, Machamp, Gengar, Dragonite. This is one of those instances where the rest of the team for the bottom three is a little underwhelming. There's a lot of repeats. There's stuff that shouldn't be there, like, two Onyxes and the fact that there's only one Ghost line. You couldn't really do a lot with that. And then same with Dragonite. There's only one Dragon line, so you had to have a bunch of Dragonators. Like, all that aside, that doesn't matter because these four aces are so so deservedly iconic. Like not only is that those characters, don't not only do they deserve the iconography that they have, their Pokemon themselves deserve it. Even though Lapras is technically stronger than the other two, I I can't disagree that this is a very good progression of just very good, very strong, very iconic, just just a very impressive squad of Elite Four aces here. Um, yeah, like it's fascinating that they nailed it first time and then went over to Johto and kind of screwed it up. Like I don't really know what happened there. So you might be thinking, wait, but this is only number two. If I'm giving so much praise for how perfect this squad is, how was there still one more? Now, truthfully, I originally was going to end with Kanto being number one. And a part of me felt a little bad about doing that because that felt like the safe choice. That felt like, oh, you're just a Gen 1er, like, they're iconic because they were first, like yada yada. And I could definitely hear that argument. Um, but I was originally gonna end with them, but then I decided I was going to include one other Elite Four squad. They are a unique Elite Four. Plus, if I didn't include this last one, there would only be 13 teams, and that's unlucky. You can't have that. So, the true number one best Elite Four squad of all time, in my opinion, is the Blueberry Academy. Is this cheating a little bit because they're intentionally made to be a post game, you know, like after you've done literally everything, after like, final DLC, you know, in like impossible challenge type thing? Yes, kind of. But they are still a squad of four Elite Four aces, and man, is it a good squad. Um, am I slightly biased by the fact that Blaziken is my favorite Pokemon? Yes, I'll fully admit that. I really like that Blaziken gets the spotlight here. Um, I honestly, kind of on the flip side of that, I honestly think it's a little weird that he even does have Blaziken, considering um, Crispin is like seems to be associated more so with his Mag Mortar. It's what he stands next to in the overworld. It just seems to be like more tied to him. The other three have starter Pokemon on their teams, but they aren't the aces, whereas Blaziken is randomly the ace on this team. That's a little weird, but like I said, I can't complain too much because I like Blaziken so much. So there we go. Even if this was Magmortar instead of Blaziken, I still think it would be a number one just because the rest of the team is so unbelievably also good. No matter who, I mean, Blaziken or Magmortar, it would like. And I really like Magmortar too. Vibe wise for for a squad, clearly showing with me ranking the platinum one so high. So yeah, regardless of who the fire one was, I still think this would be number one because Excadrill, a great Pokemon. It's honestly a little smaller than you might think, but when I'm able to in this scenario make them all relatively the same size. It's just I think Excadrill has always had a really, really good design. It's one of my favorite design Pokemon from Gen 5. So that's great. It's a lot faster than you think it would be. It hits a lot harder than you think it should. Actually, tied with Metagross for at least at one point the highest attack out of any steel type. I imagine that's beaten by like Solgaleo and maybe some other things at this point, but for a while Metagross and Excadrill are both tied at 135 to have the highest attacks out of any steel type, which is crazy. Speaking of which, Metagross is it's again a pseudo legendary, so it is automatically bumping us up a few points. And you could even technically argue that this has kind of two pseudo legendaries on the team. Some people argue that Archaludon is pseudo. It has 600 base stat total. I personally don't think that's enough to make it a pseudo legendary. I do think it being a three-stage evolution with the slow level up group, um, it's I think like you need to hit like all three of those. But Regardless, Archelodon does have 600 base stat total. It it just looks like a big imposing Pokemon that fits right in with other pseudos. So, if you want to call it a pseudo legendary, that's your prerogative. I personally would disagree with it, but not gonna be like vehemently like, like I'm not gonna go so hard on that necessarily. Um, it is very funny. I never really noticed until I had them all together like this. It is very funny that Metagross, Archaludon, and Escadrille are all part steel, but only one of them actually keeps their steel type after they all terrestrialize. Escadrille tears into a fairy type, Archaludon tears into a dragon type, and then Metagross keeps the steel typing. So I don't know, I just find that kind of funny. But yeah, as far as post-game super bosses go, this squad is amazing. I literally have no notes outside of technically maybe switch out Blaziken for Magmortar, but even then, I still think it would be number one on my list. So, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about this entire list here. Let me know if you disagree with any of my rankings. Are there any individual Pokemon you think I was too easy or too hard on? Any Pokemon that you like a lot more than I do? Anything that you feel like I forgot to mention um, or just any of that down below. This is definitely something that I think could lead to a lot of very interesting discussions down below. So, um, yeah, and if you have your own personal rankings, I would love to hear that as well. I had a lot of fun developing this, and if maybe even a thing where, if I came back to try to do something similar a year from now, I would have different opinions. But as of right now, I personally still stand by every single entry here. But yeah, if you have differing opinions and want to leave your list down below. I would love to hear them. So, with all that, I will see you all next time.